political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 103.9 LI News Radio.
Hey, welcome to the show, folks. This is Steve Levy, former county executive here in Suffolk County, and now the host of this show, Speak Out Long Island, and we really appreciate you tuning in. We'd appreciate it even more if you would pick up that phone today and call in and give us your opinion on issues of the day. We're at 631-451-1039. That is very easy to remember. The 1039 is the same as the channel on your radio, 103.9 Long Island News Radio FM. We are also simulcast on your website at linewsradio.com if you're ever traveling out of the Suffolk area. But as you know, we have 4 segments to our show. It's a live call-in. The first 20 minutes, I spout off about issues of the day. And we open the phones in the second session. And that will be simultaneous to our conversation with New York State Senator Lee Zeldin, who's also a candidate for Congress this year. So he'll have a lot of interesting tidbits to add relative to the state and federal level. Then the second hour, starting at about 3 o'clock, we get into some nice spirited debate. We'll have on the left Elaine Turley, who is a one-time candidate on the Democratic side, both legislature and assembly, I believe. And she's a committee person up in the Smithtown area. And we're also going to have calling in Mike Lawler, who is one of the campaign managers for Rob Astorino, the Westchester County executive, who is likely to be nominated as the Republican candidate for governor against Andrew Cuomo this November. So we'll be talking about various issues that will affect the race. So let me get into something that occurred this week, which I'm just fascinated with and very anxious to share with you. As you probably know, one of the things I've been doing since going back into the private sector was heading up a new organization called the Center for Cost-Effective Government. And a lot of people think, well, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? Center for Cost-Effective Government. Yeah, to an extent it is, but it's also an entity that was established to create a counterbalance to a lot of the special interest, big spending entities out there. Now, I noticed very early on when I was a county legislator at a young age, you'd be, sitting around the horseshoe, and the folks who packed the legislative auditorium were those with an interest in the budget. And it was 90% of the time people who want something in that budget, a sweetener in the budget, whether it's employees who wanted to add to benefits or salaries, or it was someone from a contract agency or someone from some group that wanted something. The ones who were not there were your average taxpayers who were out working for a living in the middle of the day to try to raise the money to pay the taxes that funded all these programs. And don't get me wrong, a good number of these programs were extraordinarily worthy. They help feed the hungry, house the homeless, and do so much more. But without any kind of cap, without any kind of prioritization, you had a tendency for all of these legislators to say yes to everything because they all sounded good in a vacuum, and that's where you get into trouble. And that's why I was always a strong believer in a tax cap. A tax cap creates discipline, whether it's on a school board level, a county level, a town level, or the state level. Without a cap, you look at every program that comes before you, and it all has merit. You say yes to everything. A cap says, hey, we can't put them all in here this year. We're just going to prioritize and pick those that we really need rather than those that we may want. And for those that didn't make the cut next year, come back next year and we'll see how the economy is. And that has really been what has successfully brought budgets under control in the last few years. I mean, the story that we heard this year, the headline, only 4 schools on the island are looking to pierce their cap. That's amazing. This is the lowest increase since 1996. So kudos to the men and women who started the push for the cap very early on, many, many years ago. It started right here on Long Island. from groups such as Long Islanders for Education Reform, people like Fred Gorman and Andrea Vecchio, Laura Pandalakis, Anita McDougall, regular business people, housewives, people who are on boards of education said, we can't do this anymore. We can't afford this anymore. It might all be worthy, all of these programs that we're spending on, but as I used to always say, all the programs in the world don't mean a hill of beans if you can't afford to live here in the first place. What good are you doing your children if you have taxed their parents to such a degree that they're moving to Florida or Carolina or Pennsylvania or somewhere else? You know, we see that we spend so much money educating our kids, and we love our schools. It's one of the reasons we move here in the first place. But we're spending all this money. We educate them well, and then they leave. And then 3/4 of them, when they go away, don't come back. We're seeing young people leave en masse from this island. We're seeing seniors leave because they might have equity in their homes, but you can't pay taxes with the equity in your home. You sell your home here, you go to Florida, you go to South Carolina, you go to North Carolina, you live like a king. It's crazy. Better yet, you don't pay any state income tax in Florida or Texas, these other places. Why do you think that some of these companies, these motor companies, are leaving California? They're packing up and they're going to Texas because you take 10, 12% off the state income tax in some of these states. It's huge amount of money. You live much better when you don't have to deal with that kind of high taxation. Well, no question that the taxes are here on Long Island, and it has to be fixed. And while the cap has stopped the increases for a temporary point of time, don't get fooled because spending is still going up. And that's the problem. You have to look at what the driving forces of the spending are if you want to get control of things. You see, you can have a cap, but if you still have the mandates that are bankrupting the schools and the county and the towns, it's only a matter of time before all of the reserves are dried up and you no longer get those 5% increases that you got this year from the state for our schools. And it's fiscal Armageddon. There are structural deficits because the pension costs keep going up. The payouts for unused sick days keep going up. The health care costs keep going up. Not by 2%, which is the cap, but by 10%, 15%, 20%. It doesn't add up. So the group LIFER, Long Islanders for Education Reform, put together a meeting this past week, which brought people together in this public forum to say, hey, we got the cap. We won the cap. People said we couldn't do it, but we did. But now it's the next step. You have to also cap the mandates. There's so many mandates that are unique to New York, which is why our taxes are so much higher than many of these other states. Something called the Wicks Law, passed in the 1920s, which says that if you want to construct a building in the public sector, or you can't just hire one general contractor who can then hire the subs and save a lot of money. No, you have to go out and, hire all the different subs, and it just, it's estimated it can cost 10, 20, 30% more for all of these public buildings. That's in New York, not in other places. We have a scaffold law. If you're trying to construct a building, the crazy, over-the-top liability that businesses have to incur. Listen, we want safety, absolutely, but it goes so overboard here in New York that it makes much construction cost prohibitive. And then we have something called the Triborough Amendment. The Triborough Amendment, and this is what makes teachers go nuts when they hear there is an attempt to try to modify it. The Triborough Amendment guarantees step increases even after the contract has expired. What's a step? A step is an extra bonus increase in salary for existing another year. It's not the negotiated salary of 2 or 3% that you might negotiate. These days it's 1 or 2%. Years ago, it was 6 and 7%, and then you added that to a 2, 3, 4% step. You had some years where salaries were going up 6, 7, 8, 9% a year. And then, it hits the fan after a while. And what happened is here in New York State, when the contract expires, those steps continue. Now, in the private sector, you don't have steps. You don't even know what that is. You start off at a certain salary, and then it goes up every year depending on what you negotiate, if it goes up. In these hard times, since the very difficult recession, many people in the private sector have not gotten any raises at all. And in fact, many people were losing their salaries. They were getting their hours cut back. So you might have heard in the public sector that people were getting frozen. Well, that might have been on a negotiated salary, but the steps continued. The only exception was Nassau, where the control board came in and said, we're going to freeze even the steps. And that helped Nassau avoid bankruptcy. Well, long story short, there is a push now to say, hey, why should we have these steps continue when the contract has expired? Let the negotiations go forth in full effect. And managers, school boards, school administrators, county executives, supervisors have been saying for the longest time, when you have a tri-borough amendment in place where the steps are guaranteed, there is very little incentive for the union to negotiate. Hey, we can sit back and prolong this and wait this out until management caves because we're still getting our increases. And it's only in New York that this happens. So the movement has been afoot to stop it. And that's what this meeting was about at the Melville Marriott this past week. I moderated this meeting, and we had on the panel E.J. McMahon, who is from the Empire Center for New York State Policy, a brilliant guy. He's a guru of financing and numbers, and really lays it out for residents of the state of New York to say why it's so expensive to live here. And he really opened the floodgates to discuss this concept of the tri-borough amendment. Well, we had about half of that audience. There were probably about 250 people. About half of them were taxpayers saying enough, and about half of them were members of unions saying, with signs, don't touch our pension, stuff like that. Now, it really did underscore why it's so tough to get reform and change here on Long Island and in New York. The unions are very, very powerful here, especially compared to other areas around the nation and even around the state. They're just very, very powerful here. And they do intimidate. Now, let me qualify that by noting that the people, they were lovely people. They're great neighbors. They're good-hearted people working hard to educate our children and make it a better life for everyone. They rightly point out that people move here because of the amazing quality of the schools. And, at one point a woman said, well, what do you think a teacher is worth? This was a teacher, the response I usually give to that is, listen, a teacher is worth every penny you pay them. But at some point, the question, just like with police officers, just like with, elected officials and others, there's another question to be asked. What can we afford? And you have to look at things like a pendulum. At one point, the pendulum might have been too far one way, where it was important to have that strong union leadership to prevent exploitation. And it was understood that when you went into the public sector, you were probably making less than your counterparts in the private sector, but you were going to be making up for that with benefits and steady work. Well, that has changed because now, the benefits are much, much better than the private sector, and the wages are better than the private sector as well. So, the pendulum can go from one direction all the way to the other. And, as time goes on, sometimes you have to bring that pendulum back to the middle. There was one individual, one of the taxpayers, who got up there and said, look, I love you guys, everyone in this room, all the people, the taxpayers, the teachers, the union, whatever. I've got a son who's a doctor and another one, a daughter who's a lawyer. And they both moved off of Long Island, a doctor and a lawyer, because it was just too hard to make it here. They'd get by here. They would get by, but they'd still struggle, a doctor and a lawyer. And they said, listen, I can go to Carolina. I can go to these other states and live like a king, and that's what they're doing. So you're seeing this brain drain sucking away all of our youth, grandparents being, taken away from seeing their grandkids taken away. There has to be something done about this. Now, unfortunately, the meeting was just about the Triborough and teachers, and it should have been about a lot more, because other mandates that are important have nothing to do with teachers. For instance, teachers are paying a very fair share when it comes to contributing to their health care. Could be 15, could be 25%. In the county, you still pay zero if you are an employee. Incoming employees will finally pay 15%, but present employees pay nothing. Retirees pay nothing. Okay, how long is that sustainable? Teachers don't get overtime that is added into their pension like police officers do. So teachers will have very ample pensions, but they're not the outrageous $125,000 pensions, $150,000 pensions that you're seeing from law enforcement, where, a person might have a $180,000 base salary, which already is crazy. But then you in the last couple of years, you see them working these incredible hours to the point where their final year salary is $250,000. And then that becomes the base for the pension for the rest of their lives. And that's how you get a $150,000 pension. Not salary, pension. Okay, it really is nuts. And then, teachers don't get paid, don't get cash outs for their unused sick days. You either use it or lose it. But in other unions, like in law enforcement, if you don't use it, you get paid. Some people get paid $200,000-$300,000 when they leave government for these unused days. So a lot of folks are saying, we can't afford this anymore. We're not saying take away people's pensions, take away their salaries, but let's get control over this stuff. And with the pension system now, a lot of teachers were there saying, don't touch my pension. Well, the first thing is the reforms that are being talked about are not touching anyone who has a pension now or is in the system now. You're in there, you're keeping what you have or you bargain for. It's the new people coming in. At least let's match what they have in the private sector, which is a 401k type of defined contribution program where you put in a little, it's matched by the employee, and the employer and the employer match, and then it goes up and down with the market. In government, it's guaranteed 7.5% return no matter what. So if the market's going up 2%, taxpayers make up the rest. That's why taxes were under such assault over the last few years, because the market was down. Taxpayers had to make up that difference. Really, really, really tough for taxpayers to deal with that. At one point, a fella got up there and said, one of the union guys said, stop blaming us. And granted, you shouldn't blame the union members. You shouldn't even blame the leaders, because it's not their fault for negotiating a gun contract. It's not their fault for taking it. They should. That's their right. They want it in negotiation. They should take it. They said the problem is Wall Street. The problem is that everything collapsed, blah, blah, blah. Well, and China is taking all the jobs. Well, you know who else is taking the jobs? Texas, Carolina, Florida, Ohio, other states that don't have the tax burden that New York does. So that's something that has to be kept in mind. It's not the fault of the union member. It's not the fault of the union leader. Who do I say is at fault? The elected officials, who kowtow to the pressure. Now, these tactics are very, very intimidating. Let me tell you, folks. I had to moderate that meeting the other day, and I had to do my best to make sure blows were not thrown. You've seen some of these film clips of these elected bureaus in Europe and elsewhere where they're throwing tables at each other. I mean, we rarely have that in this country, but it could have been that the other night because people were heated on both sides. And, when you get people in there angry and steaming from the ears and having the signs, elected officials back down. In fact, we had elected officials who were slated to speak at this meeting. They backed out. They did not show up because I don't need this. And that's unfortunate. But the people within that group, Long Islanders for Education Reform, they didn't back down. Thank God when there was this type of intimidation when the tax cap was being considered. They stuck to their guns and they got it done. And they're not going to back down now either. They're saying we've got to have mandate relief or we're going down the tubes. And the point I make is this. Those intimidation tactics may put fear into some. But I think that fear is outweighed tenfold by the love that many of these residents have for their children and their grandchildren. They want them to stay here on this island. And you have to understand what the problem is before you can fix it. And if you want to know what's causing high taxes, you have to first understand what mandates mean to local budgets and to people who are putting budgets together, whether it's on the school board level, the village level, the town, or the county. When 70% of your budget is personnel and you're being told that you must spend this amount of money on, through mandatory arbitration on the salaries and the benefits, et cetera, you have no choice. And either taxes are going up or other things are going to get cut. And that's what we're facing today. So power to those who are fighting for this mandate relief, and hopefully they'll get the same success that they hit in the tax cap. All right, we're going to want you guys to come back in a few minutes. The phones will be open, and we'll also be joined by Lee Zeldin, our state senator, who's also running for Congress in the 1st CD. Join us at 451-1039. We'll be on with Lee, and then in the second hour, we're going to be joined by a representative for Governor Cuomo and a representative for Republican Rob Astorino, and we're going to debate the upcoming race. So stay with us, folks. You should be getting that too with all your ads. It takes a while to sink in.
Yeah, I would say that, so I knocked on an ED this morning. I would say about 30%, we're in Smithtown. I'd say about 30% are recognizing me by my face. 100%, because we're going to Republican primary.
Right.
100% know what's going on. But, with Demos's ads, it's very interesting. None of them like me. Nobody likes me.
Thanks. I'm sorry they started late because it was an overture.
None of them like me.
How you doing, bud?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thanks for checking out the show. I know you're here at the airport, not for this, but I'm Steve Levy. How you doing? Where do you live?
I live in Bay Street.
Oh, great. That's not your district, though, right? Nah, even for the congressional thing.
You coming back from vacation? Or?
No, I picked my sister up. She lives in Florida. She's coming.
Nice. That's really nice. Oh, by the way, you see that young lady, the blonde with the baby?
Yeah.
That's Jennifer. She's planning a date. She used to work for me.
Wow, man! I've always wanted to meet you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh my God.
What was it piped out? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, you can hear what we're saying?
Yeah, we got the speaker.
Okay. So you heard we were talking about mandates. So we're going to start our show. We got to get going in a second, but I just wanted to say hello.
All right. Is everybody get an autograph?
Yeah, I mean that and $2 will get you on the subway for what it's. Was it Doug?
Yeah.
You got something? Or you just want me to?
No. You said $2?
No, it's a joke. It's like that. If you have $2 in this, it'll get you on the subway.
Oh,
You know. Hey, I can make some money like Pete Rose. Best of luck to a Bay Shore fan. All right, man. You're the best. Thanks, dude.
Appreciate it.
Take care, all right?
Yeah, great day.
Don't forget Lee Zeldin. He might have neighbors in his district, all right?
Zeldin?
Lee
Yeah.
Zeldin, all right?
How you doing?
Thanks.
Big fan of you too.
All
Honestly.
Thank you.
into politics.
All right, good. Keep listening, all right?
I will.
We'll see you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right,
Take care.
thanks. All right, now we ruined it. Now I know he's full of shit. So, anyway, let's get into
He knew he was full of shit when he said it to me.
what?
He knew he was full of shit when he said it to me.
Well, that's right, because he just said he didn't, right? 2 seconds ago. So, he'll say anything. So,
Yeah, what was I saying?
what do you want to get into Obamacare a little bit, just to emphasize
So that's
again?
what I've been raising.
Okay.
Yeah. So people, I mean, like they don't like him, but you know, like they ask about it, and what I'm noticing is that they never accuse me. They're always asking, is it true?
Right.
It's the skepticism amongst the Republican primary voters is extremely high, which is a good thing for us.
Right.
And they want to believe us because they don't like it. They don't like the way they look. But like you have to make that contact
Right.
with voters, and it
To
takes us-
erase any doubt.
yeah, 10 to 60 seconds. 100% of them are good with our answer, and they're voting for us.
My thinking is it's going to be a low turnout, especially in June.
How low do you think? So September of 2010.
Yeah. I'm going to say
was-
20%.
No. So
Just
September.
get comfortable trying to hit when you sort of.
Yeah, okay.
Like wherever you want.
So thank you.
That was September, remember?
So September 2010, three-way primary, millions of dollars getting spent 8 days after Labor Day, 16%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's all it was?
So it was.
And it's going to be less now.
Less. So that was 25,000 votes.
Well, that's good for you, though.
That's good for me.
That's good for you. And that's
Definitely
what I told
good.
Maurice there. And sorry I can't make it on Friday, but I blasted out the invite to
Thank
all
you.
my people.
Yeah, I'm on that email list. I got that. Thank you.
Yeah. And Mercer's still coming through, huh?
Mercer, you know, I'm not really getting all the play-by-play. I do
You
know,
shouldn't, yeah.
I do know that he launched the Super PAC
Yeah.
with a substantial six-figure donation.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy, man.
Yeah.
You know, he helped me out. Well, he doesn't want me to take him, but he helped with the Senate.
Okay. Well, he, you know, we tag teamed him from so many different angles. We had so many people reach out to him. We had Randy. Randy reached out. Rick Lazio reached out. John Faso reached out.
So he's getting bombarded.
Christine Comer reached out.
He took my call, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
He did. And I told you, so he said, I like Lee.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, that was
Well,
good.
you know what? Did you talk to him after I met him?
Before.
Because it had to have been right around the same time.
Yeah.
Because I met him the first time. Never spoke to
Well,
him.
when did you meet? It was just a couple
It
of
was
weeks.
March 18th.
It was before that.
Okay.
Might have been a little before that.
It might have been the same. The timing, your call with him might have been perfect timing.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so Obamacare, Common Core.
Yep. Okay.
I'm going to be talking about that for the guys in the states. Do you have an earpiece there, just in case someone's calling in?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm hearing a little echo. I want to put on my ear thing, but let's talk about MTA
Okay.
in the context of potential strike.
Okay.
And I could segue into that you
Sure. Absolutely. No, I mean I've studied the MTA's finances very much so.
well, you could talk about maybe
The overtime abuse,
and then don't increase
the managers and supervisors. They have, over 10,000 managers and supervisors.
Could open up the debt. What are you going to do to deal with the nation's debt?
Yep. Okay.
Anything state level going on right now from here until
Well,
June?
last week,
Big-
we now have a new state snack,
you don't,
yogurt.
you don't want to go there.
Well,
You don't
I was
wanna go
actually the only one who voted against it.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. You say we got other. Let's do that.
All right.
I'll make fun of it,
Okay.
and then, especially when you're the only. That was a great vote.
Yeah, thank you.
In fact, I saw a
Me-
blog on that.
Yeah. Did you see the Daily Show?
No.
Oh, you gotta see it. Jon Stewart did a 7-minute clip 2 nights ago, where he pulled out the best from the debate. Hilarious. David Letterman did a stand-up skit what about the pretzel? And each time Michael's answer was just no. And then Gustavo says, well, what about if the pretzel was dipped in yogurt? Well, then it's kind of like 2 in 1. And Michael said, well, the yogurt would be the state snack, but not the pretzel.
You know, don't these guys know that it's the Daily Show and what they are? Ed Romaine got skewered by the Daily Show. That was, you got to be crazy. I mean, they're funny. They all think they're going to be laughing along with them, but you're going to be the butt of the joke, man.
Well, fortunately, and Jon Stewart brought in a part where Michael was laughing at it at the debate, and fortunately, it made him look good.
You'll hear the music. You hear the music, folks. That means we're back. This is Steve Levy. Welcome back to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. I'm the former county executive here in Suffolk County, and we're here for another hour and a half at LongIslandNewsRadio.com and 103.9 FM. The phones are open at 451-1039 for my special guest, Lee Zeldin, our state senator and fellow who's running for Congress here in the 1st District. Welcome, Lee.
It is great to be back on the show. Thank you for the invite.
Wonderful to have you back. Now, with Lee, there were so many important questions out there, so many important issues, federal, state level. We have young women being kidnapped in Africa. We have a $17 billion debt in this country. We have schools looking for more money. But without question, the most important issue of the day, the most important bill had to be what happened in the state legislature last week when the state legislature adopted yogurt as the state snack. That was hilarious when I heard this. What's going on up there, Lee? What was this all about? Tell me you didn't vote for this, Lee.
Well, I didn't vote for. I voted against the bill, and I have nothing against yogurt. I love yogurt. I love different flavors of yogurt. However, I just couldn't bring myself to vote for naming yogurt as the official state snack of New York. Now, it's one of the good things for New Yorkers is that the yogurt industry is growing. That it's contributing to the New York State economy. Chobani upstate is expanding. Mm-hmm. However, I know that it would be very difficult for me to go back home to my constituents. And when they said, "What did you do this week?" If this is all I had to show, because I know that people want to see me fight for, against Common Core, to stop Common Core, to repeal the SAFE Act, to cut taxes and restore freedoms and liberties. So, it was.
So tell
difficult.
me, your vote wasn't against yogurt per se. It was against the ridiculousness of the vote itself.
I was voting against the fact that we were voting on yogurt.
well, I could see the ads now. Lee Zeldin hates yogurt.
No, that's
vote
not true.
against Lee Zeldin.
Reject those lies. I love yogurt, but as a state snack, and they were so Jon Stewart from the Daily Show a couple nights ago did a clip about 7 minutes long.
Right.
People can see it on the Daily Show website, making light of the debate. It was actually entertaining. Mildly entertaining, and it's for folks of you who go onto Jon Stewart's website. I promise you'll get a chuckle.
Oh boy! Hey, listen, we already have the phones lighting up. I don't know if it's about yogurt, about what I talked about in the first session, or whatever. But we got Michael from Southall. Welcome to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, Michael, and we're here with Lee Zeldin. How are you today?
Good to be here.
Great. What's on your mind, Mike?
Just a quick question for Senator Zeldin. Senator, you repeatedly blamed things not getting done in Congress on Republicans and Democrats not coming together to debate issues and talk about issues that are important to the American people. But Republicans in the House have refused to allow a discussion about raising the minimum wage. And Congressman Bishop has had the personal courage to put forth a discharge petition, which would force at least a discussion on the floor about that issue. So my question, Senator, for you is, if you were in Congress, would you sign that petition?
No, I wouldn't sign that petition.
Thanks, Mike, for calling in. Lee, what? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, we here in New York State, whenever we participate in these minimum wage discussions. It's too often, you use like the big business example, the Walmart, the Target, businesses where, they might be making huge profits. And one of the most difficult challenges, first off, on Long Island, and you know this, so well, Steve, that we have it's not just an unemployment issue, but an underemployment issue. People not making enough to get by. Quite honestly, even if whether you were making, $9 an hour or $15 an hour, it's a big difference if you're 19 years old or, if you're in your 30s or 40s, you're married, you have 2 kids, you own a home, you could be making $70,000 a year and still barely be getting by. And so for small businesses all across the island, if they have $30,000 budgeted for 2 minimum wage employees, when you raise the minimum wage on them, that pot of $30,000 is still the same pot of $30,000. So one person might be making more money.
Yeah.
That just means the other person is be getting less hours, less money, or may even lose their job. And I think that's just an important dynamic. There's a few different important dynamics that really have to become part of the discussion. The challenges for small business owners when you raise the minimum wage, as well as there's a big difference between a 17-year-old making minimum wage and someone who is older. And on top of that, we have so many people who are capable of working and aren't. Some are looking for jobs. And my heart goes out to them. They are working hard to get employed. Other people are, they could be working, but they actually think they realize that they can actually make more by not working. And that's something else that we need to, it's much bigger than the minimum wage debate. Right. It's really looking at all of the different programs that provide for people who need assistance, to make sure that the math it works out. When someone decides that they don't want to take that job making $10 an hour because they can make more sitting at home, something's wrong with the system.
Well, thanks, Lee. The phones are lighting up. You're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. Our special guest for this half hour is Lee Zeldin, our state senator. We got Sam calling in online too. Sam, welcome to the show, Sam.
Hi, Senator Zeldin. So a few days ago on WLNG, I was listening in, and you said that Congressman Bishop did not have an alternative to the Republican budget proposal. But on the same day the House considered the Republican budget, it also considered and rejected the Democratic budget alternative. Congressman Bishop voted for it. So we know what his values and policies he stands for. But apparently you think it's okay to run and hide on this important issue.
Well, it's very apparent that I got to hand it to Tim's team. They had their people lined up for today, but that's good because that's what the show is all about. So thanks, Sam, and let's.
I was wondering if you were in Congress, would you have voted yes on the Republican budget?
Thanks, Sam.
And again, the congressman has been, if you want to talk about being in hiding, the congressman has been totally in hiding as far as what proposal he wants to see passed. And there have been so many different votes over the course of the last year. Some are put forth by Republicans. You have proposals by Democrats. And what's very unfortunate about that example, and I actually would like to give the congressman the benefit of the doubt, that proposal is not what the congressman is advocating as his alternative to what the Republicans put forth. I'm not going to assume that that's what he wants to see passed because the budget that the Democrats put forth has no path whatsoever towards a balanced budget.
I got to say, Lee, and for those who are hanging on the line, stay on there. We'll be with you in a minute or so. But I've got to give credit to a guy like Paul Ryan because he's getting his brains beaten out. It's so much easier to just put in a budget that doesn't deal with the deficit because you don't have to cut anything. You don't touch a darn thing. It's don't do anything controversial. Just continue to give everything that everyone wants, and just make our grandchildren pay for it. It's cowardly. Yeah, you get to say, look at me, I'm giving all these things to people, and you're also giving an ungodly debt to our kids and our grandkids. And you got at least Paul Ryan coming in and saying, hey, these are the tough choices we have to make because a $17 trillion debt is going to make us Greece, and someone has to have the guts. You just don't see it coming out of this administration that the entitlements are blowing out of control. Who's going to have the guts to do it?
Well, and what is so fascinating is that whenever we have someone putting forth a solution, now I'm 34 years old. If you want to discuss in Washington a reform that affects me as a 34-year-old, let's have that debate. But when you propose changing something that affects me decades from now, and you somehow want to spin that to scare our current seniors, you are doing such a disservice to our nation, to our next generation. You're doing nothing to tackle that debt issue. And again, I mean, the congressman has not he has not indicated that the Democratic plan is the one that he would advocate for. I would actually be surprised if that's what he said, considering that budget does absolutely nothing towards balancing the budget. I mean, I'd be surprised, but if that is, I mean, I think you should just come out and say it so we can have the debate.
I haven't heard of any Democratic plan that balances the budget, none whatsoever. And and that's not a partisan statement. That's just fact. Frank. I don't know if it's Fred or Frank. He's been waiting for a while on line 3. Welcome to the show. Hi. Welcome to the show.
This is Fred Gorman.
Oh, Fred Gorman. How are you, Fred? Yes, this is Steve Levy. You're here with Lee Zeldin as well. For the folks, now we have Fred's full name. Fred is one of the fellows I was talking about in the first half hour about putting together that program during the week from the Long Islanders for Education Reform. Fred is one of the heroes in bringing us the tax cap. Welcome to the show, Fred.
Thank you.
Hey, Fred. How are you?
Hey, Lee, it's great to talk to you.
Yeah, same here.
I want to ask you a very simple question. Can you get $100,000 jobs back to Long Island if we send you to Washington? Period. That's my first concern. Secondly, then I'd like to tell you where I think you could get a couple of $100,000 jobs up in Albany in case you don't make it, which I doubt because I believe you're going to be Bishop, but just in case. Can you tell me how to get a couple of $100,000 jobs? Can you do it?
Yeah, no. So thank you for the question, Fred. And we have to believe that we can. And I think that there are many different reasons why Long Island has continued to bleed high-paying jobs. I think part of it has to do with policy, and part of it has to do with culture. First, let me give you an example with regards to culture, because this is a very simple fix. There's a business in Farmingdale called Harry Levinson Associates. They're a distributor. Very successful, great company. The state of Kentucky comes to them, offers to move them. They would sell their property here. They wouldn't have to pay property taxes in that county. They were going to rename the town after them. This great, generous package that they offered, Harry Levinson Associates. Barry Feldman, the owner, he complains that I can't even get a return phone call from Albany. Couldn't believe it. I wanted to help him and tried to arrange him getting a return phone call, and he couldn't get it. As far as culture goes, we have governors of other states personally coming and talking to our CEOs, putting together packages, luring them to their states. Our governors need to act as CEOs, personally paying that respect and trying to put together packages that keeps our businesses here so that they can continue to expand, grow, and create more of those great high-paying jobs that you just referred to, Fred.
Let me interrupt one second.
Steve, if I could just say something quickly.
Sure, Fred.
Sure. Deepwater Port. Why aren't we making huge generators there? We can. All these generators are now being made in foreign countries. We can make them right here, and we could ship them to anywhere because we have that facility. We have the Calverton Airport. Why can we not take the remainder? And don't tell me it's because of the tree huggers. I mean, we are bleeding $1,000 jobs. You're right. Cuomo comes up with this silly thing. Listen, if you can find something, we'll give you a tax credit for a couple of years if you can do something on Stony Brook territory, Stony Brook University. That's nonsense.
Well, Fred, you know what it is, and I'm going to ask. I'll ask Lee to comment on this as well. It's not just the environmental problems in getting a permit, but it's the cost of doing business. It's so expensive here in New York State, which is why Rick Perry from Texas came up and issued a challenge to Governor Cuomo. Hey, they'll bait you anytime, any place. They're spending $140 million on this Startup New York campaign. And Rick Perry is saying, hey, come on down to Texas where we have no state income tax, very low corporate tax, and that's where people are going, Lee.
And I think that different levels of government.
Fred, let Lee answer, and then we'll get back to you, Fred.
I mean, different levels of government all have a responsibility here, and you can point to policies at you go down to town, county, state, federal government, all have a responsibility here. Now, I mean, you might have a great project, but some town councilman on some town board, I think of it as extortion with these community benefits, where in order to get permission to do a zoning change, you have to pay $2 million for some unrelated project 3 miles down the road.
You're absolutely right. The politicians are, in a sense, they're parasites. They're money parasites. They're sucking the life and happiness out of Long Island to favor their friends. You got a legislature. Everybody in the legislature feels it's their job to take care of their community. So rather than spending 50 cents on what has to be done, they're spending $1.50, because $1 of the $1.50 is really going just to basically make them stay in power. And that's a terrible part of our problem. But Lee, just to get back to what I wanted to hear from you, and which I think is important, and one of the most important issues, is can you and do you have a plan to get six-figure jobs here on Long Island? I mean, manufacturing jobs. Do you have a plan that
Absolutely.
you can work with the government to get us government jobs or something here to
Yeah, we have to. I mean,
we're starving.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. So on the federal level, we have to improve our business climate. The federal government needs to get out of businesses' way. I think that one of the reasons why we have lost so many high-paying jobs is, some of these policies that are advocated down in Washington that harm our business climate as a nation. We feel the effects first and foremost here on Long Island, when it's compounded with New York State having the highest corporate and individual marginal income tax rates in the entire country, or Long Island having the highest energy costs and property taxes. It all adds up to the cost of doing business. So, at the federal level, policies that impact family-run businesses, where when someone passes away, some farm on the North Fork would have to sell a whole bunch of land just to pay their taxes on stuff that was already taxed already, which is one of the reasons why I support the federal government repealing the death tax. There's a lot of policies at the federal government, but I really don't believe that until all levels of government do more of what's in their individual powers, that it won't add up. I don't think there's a simple solution for any one level of government. Everyone needs to chip in to help our businesses expand and grow.
Well, you're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, and our guest here today is Lee Zeldin, state senator, also a candidate for Congress. Our number is 451-1039, and Lee has been lighting up these phones. Just before I get to our next caller, this is not a straight news show. It's an opinionated show. And sometimes it might sound partisan. I try to be fair, but I also try to tell it like it is, Lee. And one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things I said, to the Romney campaign a couple of years ago is, why aren't you talking about what's happening in Republican states? In those states that are run by fiscally conservative legislatures, you're seeing growth, bucking the trend. Ohio, with John Kasich, Scott Walker, what he went through over in Wisconsin, Florida, Rick Scott, again, Texas with Rick Perry. Those are the states doing well, and it's Illinois, California, and it was Jersey going off the cliff before Christie, and New York was going off the cliff until the state Senate went Republican again and joined with Governor Cuomo to slow the rate of growth. It's right in front of our eyes, what works and what doesn't. But just wanted to throw that and make a comment, then I want to get to one more call.
I would also say it's about long-term planning. We'll have politicians who prioritize their own reelection as their first, second, and third most important priority. And when you only look, as far as budgeting, for example, if you only look to your own next election, that all of these problems that when you kick the can down the road and kick the can down the road eventually catches up to you. Right. It's about long-term planning.
Well, you're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. Jan has been waiting for 13 minutes. God bless you, Jan. We try to get everyone in if we can. And welcome to our show.
Oh, hey, how are you doing?
Very good, very good.
How are you doing, Executive Levy? And thank you for taking my call. And I have a call to Senator Zeldin, question.
Sure, shoot away.
We've been defending, and it's an old hat, and we've been doing very well with it, the Obamacare mandate in with Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 42. We have great success with that. But there was an article, and I had to defend this also, in the New York Post, saying in that same budget that in that same budget there was $28 million to create a database of gun owners, et cetera, and another $3.2 million for SAFE Act staff.
Yeah, there was so, and I'm glad
And-
you're calling. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, finish really quick. We got about 2 minutes, so
Okay, well, I've been, on the blog, this is on Facebook, and I wrote back, this not true, this not true, this, that.
Yeah.
And then this one I couldn't answer. So I was just going to say, address it, maybe put it in a newsletter. I don't know what happened. Certain people didn't know it was there. I know it was a one budget.
Well, let me clear.
Thank you very much,
the fire.
Dan.
And I'm really happy that you called with that question. So there was originally a line item appropriation for the SAFE Act, which was removed from the budget. However, Governor Cuomo has indicated Governor Cuomo controls, as the governor, different pots of money, all the state agencies and whatnot. So Cuomo has indicated that he is going to be pulling money out of one of the pots that he controls to fund the SAFE Act. So the line item appropriation was removed, but our governor is saying, you know what? I'm going to fund it anyway by pulling money out of one of the pots that I control. So that's what some people have kind of stirred emotion with. I oppose the SAFE Act, co-sponsor the bill to repeal the SAFE Act. I think it's unconstitutional. I've spoken up on the floor of the Senate
now
on
the
this
SAFE
issue.
Act for the lay people out there, that was the very hurried bill after the shootings in Connecticut that banned us certain things.
It was
gun-related things.
Tapping into that emotion, that SAFE Act went far to infringe on the rights of law-abiding Second Amendment, for law-abiding gun owners and Second Amendment advocates. It was a bad bill that shouldn't have passed, and I advocate for repealing it. I do not support the governor's decision to fund it anyway, but I think that something that got lost in the way that folks are trying to translate it to maybe to sell a couple newspapers is that the line item was actually pulled out, but the governor said, I'm going to fund it anyway with one of the pots I can control.
Wow. Well, we've got a minute left in this session here, and then we'll be back in the next hour, folks, with Elaine Turley on the Democratic side and Mike Lawler from the Republican side, talk about different issues. But I want to thank you, Lee. You are getting in the middle of important issues, both on the state and federal level. Been a number of years now that you've been a representative out here. I had to congratulate you again on getting rid of the MTA tax because we worked together very strongly on that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Long Island Railroad strike and all, but kudos for helping out a lot of people. You will have to come back. We want to thank you. In 15 seconds, any parting shots to our audience?
Anyone out there, zeldinforcongress.com is our campaign website. You can also see us on the government side at nysenate.gov. That's where all your senators have their websites. We're on Facebook at Lee M. Zeldin, Twitter at Lee Zeldin. We can please get involved. If any Republicans out there, primary on June 24th. That's a Tuesday.
Thank you, Lee Zeldin. We'll be back in a few minutes, folks, on Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. It's 451-1039. We'll see you in a few minutes.
decision said a constitutional ban against same-sex marriage passed by Arkansas voters 10 years ago was unconstitutional. A second body has been recovered after the crash of a hot air balloon in central Virginia. A third person still missing. More than 100 people involved in the hunt.
We're still not located the basket or the balloon. We do continue to keep finding debris.
Balloon Jello is with the Virginia State Police. The unidentified remains of those killed on September 11th were returned to the World Trade Center in New York nearly 13 years later. There was a solemn procession in fragments gathered this morning. The remains will be transferred to a repository 70 feet underground. Monica Eitham Murphy is a 9/11 widow.
Families are able to bring in guests, up to 3, and families will be able to see and go visit the remains at Old Town Field. It's really, the idea was it's for the families only. It's not really for outsiders to visit.
Some family members, though, were unhappy about the plans. As many as 9 flight attendants sickened today on a U.S. Airways flight. The plane landed safely at Dublin Airport in Ireland. It was on its way from Italy to Philadelphia. The flight attendants received hospital treatment. This is ABC News.
LI News Radio traffic.
Traffic moving well on the LIE eastbound and westbound in Suffolk County. This report sponsored by the T.J. Martell Foundation. We have no extra delays on the northern or southern state parkways. Still some congestion on 347 between Wisconsin and Cherryville. Also on 25A between Port Jefferson and Stony Brook. The trains are running on time. They're looking good right now at Long Island MacArthur Airport. Join the T.J. Martell Foundation in the fight against leukemia, cancer, and AIDS. Your support helps facilitate cutting-edge research that will lead to more effective treatment and save more lives. Visit tjmartell.org to learn more. I'm Bernie Wagenblatt on 103.9 LI News Radio.
LI News Radio weather.
Fast lifting, still mostly cloudy near the southwest breeze and still a 30% chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms 76. Showers and thunderstorms likely this evening. More patchy fog late. Meteorologist John Everly on 103.9 LI News Radio. Hi, this is Bud Ruby, president of Nest Egg Advisors and host of the Your Nest Egg Show. Join Jeff Seitz and myself every Tuesday at 9 p.m. and every Sunday at 1:30 p.m. Call us now at 631-952-2700.
Have you been left out in the cold by your propane company? If you're not getting the service you need,
I can pick up and talk to him. It's normally by now, but we got delayed from an ultra. 3.5 minutes. Hey, Mike Aru. Hey, thanks for calling in. We just had a spirited session here with Lee Zeldin. So, yeah, we had people calling in. It's fun. So, Elaine Turley is here. She's a fine lady, a good friend, flaming liberal. So that's why I'm very happy to have her on the show. And we'll have you as well. And we'll talk about, start off with some mandate stuff. What is Rob going to do about it? And Elaine wants to chime in on that as far as Cuomo. Then I want to get into the HUD thing. Okay, between Long Island at Oyster Bay and in Westchester where the feds are coming after them. I think that'll be interesting conversation. And maybe a little Common Core as well. Is Cuomo going to get hurt being associated with Common Core? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What is Astorino doing about it and say about it, etc.? So between those three things and a couple of callers, I think that 23 minutes will go very quick. All right, I'm going to put you on hold, bud. Thanks. I hope I'm putting him on hold and not hanging up. Is there a hold button?
Yeah, just push the clear button underneath. See how it's lit up? Push the button underneath it. You can see he's on hold.
That's it? Okay. Yeah, you'll hear the music popping at da-da-da-da-da-da, and then I'll know that's my cue. Then you'll be able to hear him through the phones. And, yeah, and I'll start it off with a. It's so much nicer when you're in studio because you can see what's going on, you relax, and if someone's just coming in for a half hour, say call in. If you're coming in for the hour, come in. So what's going on in the city? You have a place there? Market was low. Probably already went up 20%.
We're looking into the studio that's going on.
Mm.
And we refinanced our house to buy it. We bought it cash. We refinanced our house, and our mortgage rate down, so that
You're not paying that much more. We just closed on a one-bedroom co-op in Dune Road in West Hampton. It's right on the ocean. It's not that expensive. It was great, and with 35 minutes from the house. Sandcastle, it's called. You probably have a 5-bedroom for 200,000. 1 minute. All right, you sounding like a Republican now. Come on. Isn't that amazing? On your oceanfront? Ocean view. Amazing. Yeah, I remember going down there to play some golf and just looking at the houses. Right. I bought up a couple of Florida condos. See about 5 people calling in the list.
If you're looking for political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 1039 LI News Radio.
Hey, welcome back to the show, folks. This is former County Executive Steve Levy. We're welcoming you to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. This is live call-in, and we're going to welcome your calls at 631-451-1039. And if you thought that our last session was hopping with Senator Lee Zeldin and the many calls that were flying off the hook, just wait for this session, because now we have a real toe-to-toe, which is going to be awesome. We have in studio a good friend, Elaine Turley from Smithtown. Elaine is a fabulous lawyer up in Smithtown. She is a former candidate for, I know, county legislator, I think a state office as well. No state office, she can tell us. And a wife and mom, an overall good sport, who's going to take the Democratic position, or at least give her point of view, but tends to be more left of center. And on the phone chiming in is going to be Mike Lawler, who was very high up in the New York State GOP, who is now one of the campaign managers for Rob Astorino, the Westchester County executive, who's likely to be the gubernatorial candidate against Andrew Cuomo. Welcome to both, Elaine, and to our good friend Mike Lawler. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Elaine, did I get that right? You run for legislature. Did you run for state level too?
I ran in 1998 against Bob Wertz for state assembly, knowing that it was a race that we were unlikely to prevail in, but believing in the democratic process and that there should be a debate and that there should be a candidate, went out and did the good work for the Democratic Party.
Well, that's what this is all about, debate and, spirited debate. And I'm going to get right to it. I am so glad that we have both sides here, because I think, guys, this is going to be a bigger race than people think. Just a couple of weeks ago, I think there was this assumption that this was a Cuomo blowout, and it's only a question of how much he's going to win by. Astorino's not very well known. You look at the polls, blah, blah. But Cuomo's poll numbers are coming down significantly. In fact, his approval numbers are below 50%, which that usually means his work performance, which usually means there's vulnerability. But he's got $30 million, great name recognition, and it's a blue state. And Rob Astorino is not really very well known. But here's the wild card. We're hearing that folks from the left, including the Working Families Party, are very upset with the governor. If they were to give their line to a third individual, you're talking about horse race, folks, and that's just not me saying it. That's what the polls say. So this is going to be interesting. So I want to get into Mike and Elaine. Something I was talking about in my first session, mandates. I was a former county executive. I was a former state legislator. I'm telling you, these mandates are killing local property taxpayers, and I'm fed up that very little is happening on the state level. I applaud the governor and the state legislature for putting in place the tax cap, even though that was really first presented by Elliot Spitzer, but it was passed a couple of years ago. But a tax cap without mandate relief is illusory. We're going to still have troubles. Elaine, you're in studio, okay? Are they doing enough in Albany? Is the governor doing enough in Albany?
I don't agree with you, Steve, on, I know some of the issues when you talk about ending mandates or repealing the Tri-Borough Amendment, I believe, and putting a cap on bonding arbitration for police officers' contracts, and I don't agree with you there that we should repeal the Tri-Borough Amendment. I don't agree that we should cap bonding arbitration awards.
So you like paying, I'm not going to ask what your taxes are in Smithtown. You want them to go up by another 15% without caps on these things?
I'm real fortunate to live where I live. I'm happy to pay the property taxes I pay to live where I live. And I think that some of the things that we could do on Long Island to decrease our property tax burdens are, for example, consolidation. And yet we don't want to do that, do we? And some of the reasons we don't want to do that is because we want to keep that strong local control. And we want to keep things, we want to say how our local community looks and how our local community acts. And we don't want to consolidate. So we don't want to give up that control. And I've heard many people, you mentioned that I ran for public office, and when I walk door to door, I got to tell you something, even in Smithtown, the most conservative town in Suffolk County, many people said to me, I'm willing to continue to pay the property taxes I pay so I can keep local control over my community.
All right, well, we just heard from Democrat Elaine Turley saying, no to changing the Tri-Borough Amendment, which, by the way, is continued steps after a contract has expired for teachers and other union workers. No to capping arbitration, which has now given us the $200,000 police officer on Long Island. And yes to consolidation. Mike Lawler, you are a spokesperson for the GOP and the Rob Astorino campaign. You think she's all wet, or you think she's on the right track?
I appreciate where Elaine is coming from, and, like any good Democrat, she's talking about consolidation because that's what the governor is talking about. But the bottom line here is this. New York State is the highest tax state in the country. And anybody in Long Island, all they have to do is drive down the roads to know that we're not getting very much for the amount of money that we're paying. There's potholes all over our roads. Our infrastructure is crumbling. And yet property taxes continue to go up. And people across New York State are wondering, what is it that we are getting for all the money that we are paying? You talk about the suburbs, and you look at Nassau County, Westchester, and Rockland. Those are the three of the top 5 highest property tax counties in the nation. But when you look at property taxes as a percentage of the value of one's home, the top 16 counties in the nation are all upstate New York. And you look at it and you say, okay, what's wrong here? What's going on? Why are our property taxes continuing to climb? And you look at what we pay. Most of what property taxes go towards are unfunded mandates coming out of Albany, whether it be pension costs, whether it be Medicaid costs. And there's been no serious reform proposals put forth by this governor over the past 4 years.
So if Rob Astorino is governor, now, he's a county executive, Mike Lawler, and he feels the pinch of these Albany mandates.
Absolutely.
What specifically would he do that's different?
85 cents on every dollar in Westchester County. Every property tax dollar collected goes right back up to Albany to pay for the unfunded mandates.
Okay, so what would he do differently? And then I want Elaine to chime in.
Well, I think, Steve, like you as a former fellow county executive, and Chris Collins out in Erie County when he was county executive, you advocate for reforms. And part of these reforms are the way that the Medicaid system in New York is structured. You look at Medicaid in New York, the counties are paying a quarter of the share of the cost. And yet they have no say in terms of what benefits are provided. They have no control over investigating the fraud and then collecting those dollars back to help ease the burden on their fellow taxpayers. The pension reform that he put forth, Tier 6, was very shallow. Even the former Democratic co-chair, Stephanie Miner, chastised him.
Who is the mayor of Syracuse?
Mayor of Syracuse.
Well, Elaine...
All right, so Mike, let me ask you a question, though, because this is sort of where Steve started going with it with me. Would Rob Astorino support a bonding arbitration cap for your police officers' contract negotiations?
I think what we would do, what Rob would do certainly as governor, is put everything on the table, and he would talk, bring union leaders in and talk to them as he's done in Westchester County. He brought all of the union leaders to the table. They were able to come to terms on 7 of 8 public employee contracts. 39 of 40 trade unions were able to come to terms with agreements. It's not about negotiating right now. It's about bringing people together, talking over the issues, working with them. There are absolute reforms that need to be put in place in New York. You know, for instance, I know Steve is very big on the Triborough Amendment. There does need to be reforms put in place in the Triborough Amendment. Does that mean that we eliminate it? No, but there does need to be reforms put in place so that the steps don't continue when the contract runs out.
Well, that's all we were asking for. You know, our organization, Center for Cost-Effective Government, saying, look, you should keep your salary. You should keep your vacation. You should keep your health benefits when the contract expires. You just shouldn't get an automatic salary increase once it's expired. You got to negotiate for that. And the Triborough Amendment curtails tough negotiations on both sides, in our opinion. And the governor has said time and time again, Triborough is off the table. We won't even talk about it. And that's the beef that I have there. I do give him kudos for slowing the rate of spending and for the tax cap, even though it wasn't his idea.
But even still, spending has gone up $14 billion under him. And you know, a property tax cap is nice, but if you don't tie it to mandate relief, all you're doing is crippling the local municipalities. He talks about consolidation, and his consolidation, he says, "Oh, there's 10,500 districts." He's including in that sewer districts, lighting districts. That's a part of balance sheets and budgets. That's not legitimate.
Well, what I'm hearing here, though, you know, Steve started the conversation as a real negative towards Cuomo, and let me say I don't speak for Cuomo. I'm not involved with his campaign. I'm a rank-and-file Democrat in private practice that spends most of my time working in my office on Medicaid issues, by the way, and so we can get back to that. But, you know, Steve, you know, intimated to me that maybe Cuomo was at fault, and maybe some of the reason we don't have property tax relief is because he hasn't repealed the Triborough Amendment. But I know that Rob Astorino's not going to do that, and I've seen how much support Rob Astorino has from the unions. So I got to tell you, we're going to go right back to that issue with the teachers' contracts, with the police contracts. Huge issue, by the way, when Steve was county executive here. And I don't see any difference between Governor Cuomo and Rob Astorino when it comes to that support for unions. And by the way, good for him as a Republican. I'm glad we have a Republican that supports strong labor unions in New York State, because I'm with you on that. But let's be serious and let's understand there's no real difference between Cuomo and Astorino on that issue.
That's a very interesting accusation there from Elaine Turley, our Democratic representative here at Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. By the way, the phones are open at 451-1039. Mike Lawler, you're a representative for Rob Astorino. Do you buy that there's no difference between Democrat Mario Cuomo and Republican Rob Astorino? Oh, did I say Mario? Oh boy, I've been around government too long in politics. What say you? What say you?
Well, I think the difference is very clear. They both have records over the past 4 years that you can turn to. Rob Astorino has either cut or held the line on taxes. Andrew Cuomo has raised them. Rob Astorino has cut spending. When he walked into office, he had a $1.8 billion budget. It is now 1.7. And Rob was able to do that by prioritizing, not perpetuating, and working with union leaders, bringing them into his office and talking with them, working with them to negotiate fair contracts for both the union members and also for the taxpayers.
You know, Mike,
and that's the difference is very simple. That Rob has shown through leadership that he is willing to make the tough decisions to actually cut spending, cut taxes, and yet still be fair to the hardworking taxpayers and citizens of this state.
Mike, this is such an interesting dynamic, and I posed this to Elaine as well this year with this race, and specifically Andrew Cuomo, because you know he has his core of support. But some of the opposition he's getting, it's a very, you talk about politics making strange bedfellows. The Democratic fundraiser here in Long Island, Suffolk County last week, Cuomo comes, he's the guest speaker, And outside, you had 1,000 people protesting. I don't know if you were there, Elaine. I know you go to a lot of them, not this one. But in that protest group, it was such a weird amalgamation of folks. You had teachers union folks who were against the tax cap, and I support the governor on that one. They were saying they're not getting enough money. I think they were wrong on that one, too. But then they were blasting him on Common Core. And then you also had conservatives who were out there blasting him on Common Core. You had some of the people who were against his Safe Gun Act, okay? But Common Core, this issue has been registering in intensity in the polls stronger than Obamacare. It's incredible. And you've got people on the right and the left who don't want it. Many people don't even know what the heck it is. But where is Rob Astorino coming down on this? Does he hope to make this an issue?
Well, Steve, it is an issue, and it's not one that Rob is making. It's one that parents and teachers and concerned citizens across New York State are making. They have been coming up to us wherever we go, whether it's in Long Island, whether it's in the North Country or Western New York or the Hudson Valley, and many of them Democrats saying, "I'm supporting you because of your stance on Common Core," and Rob's against it. I mean, Rob has been clear from the start that he does not support Common Core. He believes that education decisions should be made and set and controlled at the local level with input from parents, from teachers, from administrators, and not Washington, D.C. bureaucrats coming up with an untested plan to educate our kids. The governor has been very clear in his support of Common Core.
Oh, well, let me pose it.
He fast-tracked Common Core in New York State. We were one of only 2 states to do it. He sent a letter to the Board of Regents demanding that Common Core be implemented, and they followed his lead. And now we're seeing the repercussions of that. Students spent over the last month and a half, 6 weeks studying to the test, and teachers having to teach to the test.
Well, Mike, let me pose this to Elaine Turley, our Democratic spokesperson here today, and you're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 451-1039, live call-in. Common Core, Elaine, for the benefit of the public out there who might not have heard of this controversy yet, it's nationwide now. The federal government is saying, we have to raise our standards. We're not competing well with other nations. And there's the big debate, should the feds be implementing the standards and forcing the state to uphold those federal standards? It's a new kind of teaching, a more holistic type of teaching. Many parents are saying too much testing, too difficult, the change too fast. The governor did propose it. He's backing off on it now and starting to say, let's slow it down. But do you think this is going to hurt him? Or have you been hearing anything in your neighborhood from parents?
Steve, I'm going to take it to a different level. I'll first of all talk about Governor Cuomo and his support and what I'm hearing from other people. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about my view of it, if you don't mind. Because I'm really I'm confused about this whole issue. I'm confused about why this is so controversial. I was out to dinner with a teacher from Queens a couple of weeks ago, and I said to her, I'm really confused about why so many people are opposed to this Common Core standards. And it's not a curriculum, by the way, from what I understand. I've been doing some research because of my confusion about this, and it's not a curriculum. Nobody says it's a curriculum. It's a standard. There are standardized tests. It's what I can see a move towards, as you said, a more comprehensive view of education, a more holistic approach. Let's understand language. Let's use language. Let's converse in language. Let's read Shakespeare. Let's read classics. Let's read nonfiction.
Are you in favor of it?
This is what I'm saying.
And should Cuomo be in favor?
I think I am. Now, I asked this teacher, I said, I'm curious about this. Why are you opposed to it? Because I am.
Well, I know
and that's what I'm hearing.
I know
because I am.
By
the way, I read about Rob Astorino's opposition, and I read that he was doing homework. He and his wife were doing his child's math homework, and it was too hard for his child, and he's opposed to it because it's too hard. I'm going to give you my view.
Elaine.
I'm not going to give you Cuomo's view. I'm going to give you my view.
Okay.
I don't understand why so many parents and teachers and our society in general is so concerned about challenging our children and at least giving this a try to see if our children can meet this challenge.
Mike, you want to just respond?
A few things. And I think there are a lot of concerned people on both sides with legitimate concerns on both sides of this argument. For Rob's perspective, like many parents who are dealing with Common Core as a parent, where their children are currently going through the education system and they're being tested on these, many of these kids, it's no longer 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's 2 plus 2 equals 4 because, and you have to sit there, and as Elaine pointed out, a lot of it is dealing with language and writing. Kids don't necessarily all learn the same way, and it is a curriculum here in this sense. You have one organization creating the test, the national test that every student has to take as part of these standards. And so everybody is being taught to this test. Children do not learn in the same way. And the same if you were to look in the healthcare industry, or if you were, Elaine, you're a lawyer, giving legal advice. You don't give everyone the same legal advice. Circumstances are different. Children do not all learn the same. And so therefore, teachers must be allowed to teach these children in a way that is beneficial to the children in the classroom.
So it's fair to say this is
You know what, Mike? I'm going to say to you that there's a wonderful book out there, Multiple Intelligences, by a guy named Howard Gardner. I, like Rob Astorino's wife, have a background in special education, an interest in special education. I can't agree with you more that we all have different learning styles and that we all have different ways of learning. That does not mean that we don't have to have certain information in order to succeed in a very competitive global environment now. And if we're telling our children that we're not creative enough, we don't have the tools, we don't have the skills to help you, even considering your different learning styles, to learn how to be successful in your life, then we are failing our children.
Mike,
I
got about 30 seconds left. Mike, give me a wrap-up.
Yep, we all want higher standards for our kids. But we all, Elaine, myself, Steve, we all went through the either the public school system or private school, and we turned out just fine because teachers at that time were allowed to teach, and they were allowed to bring into the curriculum music and physical activity. That stuff is being pushed aside so that the teachers now are teaching to these tests so that kids can learn exactly what Washington bureaucrats tell them they must know in order to advance in the global economy. And that just won't work. Education should be set and controlled at the local level with the input of the teachers that are in the classroom and the parents and the administrators that are there in these communities.
Mike Lawler, thank you so much for joining us. Any shameless plugs in 10 seconds?
I would just say this race is going to be won or lost out in Long Island. Most people don't understand 44% of the electorate comes from upstate New York, 29% out of New York City, and the balance out of Long Island, Westchester, and Rockland.
Thank you.
And we're in a position to win.
Thanks, Mike. We'll see you in the next half hour, folks.
Thanks.
I want to get into that HUD thing a little bit. You know what I really want to get into? This kidnapping in Nigeria. See, here's my thing. I can get into this with you. I've got a problem with Democrats and this bullshit.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
See, to me, the war on women,
Let's do it.
killing women, and that's going to be fun. Then, did you get my thing about the controller treasurer?
Yeah, I don't.
It's kind of boring, but I want to do some
Is
local
that a
stuff.
political thing?
Not really. We're almost
Is that like a political thing?
It's just local. How about
I don't really know.
how about the gas station thing? Did you see what surprised me, and I did tell.
I will tell you this, and I would say this, that now I don't know the details, so tell me the details. But I will tell you that one of the things I thought that if I won county legislature, you were there, I wasn't. You were one of the cowboys, I wasn't. If I won county legislature, what I thought I would do is go through the books and eliminate laws, find every law I could repeal.
We actually had. Every once in a while we put in a bill to eliminate certain laws. You're right, we did that.
Oh, I'd love to do that. I mean, that, you know,
There's
because
so
a
much
lot of it, let's be serious. Let's you and I look each other in the eye and be serious, because you did it, they all do it. I need some name recognition. I'm gonna propose.
There's
after she was no-show knower.
A balloon.
Letting.
Well, Schneider was a champ. What about before you were here?
I don't even know who Schneider is. Schneider been a Republican or a Democrat, by the way?
Republican turned independent, turned Democrat.
Okay.
I think he's still independent, but he's
Because you probably wouldn't be criticizing him if he was a Republican. Let's be
I'm
serious.
what?
Yeah, you know you wouldn't be criticizing.
Oh, no, I do. And let me tell you, I support Cuomo and a lot of stuff. But did you hear my thing about the yogurt? Where the state, when Zeldin was here, we were talking about the state of New York this past week, the legislature, they officially designated yogurt as the official snack of New York. I think, come on. And the Daily
Bob
Show
Wertz, by
did
the
it.
way, somebody told me that I should say that the only thing Bob Wertz ever accomplished was making like the bird or the ladybug or something, the official bug of, you know, insect of New York. You know, it's.
All right, so, but I want to talk about that gas station because I think.
All right, so what do they want to do?
You already have on a gas pump credit
Yeah.
and cash.
I
It's
look at them.
huge.
I pick gas stations that
Okay.
way. So go ahead.
So Schneiderman goes into a gas station, which he doesn't look, and then the bill comes out, and he pays like $1 more for the credit per gallon. So he got rooked. But it was right in front of him. So he's now he wants to force the gas station owners to have an electronic thing on your credit card receipt that shows you the difference. You've got it posted right here. It's just like, and Sumi calls it government run amok. And I think it's an example of the legislature overregulating. He's got another bill to ban puppy mills, okay? You know, not puppy mills, but puppy stores. He wants them all to be at shelters, which is a nice thing. It's nice to go to shelters if you want. But the ban,
animal people are.
They're crazy. Believe me, I know. And they're you know, rabid.
They'll be in front of mine. They'll find out where I live.
Okay, you're not saying anything. Well, say you're for the ban, because they don't want the animal stores. They want everybody to go.
Well, maybe we should regulate. But if I say we regulate the puppy mills, we regulate the puppy stores, then and you know we do have to protect animals.
But that doesn't go. It doesn't go far enough. You know. Yeah. But it's just examples of the crazy legend. And you hit it. A lot of it is for pure publicity.
Oh,
you know?
was it? I don't know what the enforcement mechanism was, but if you have ice on your car.
That was a John Cooper.
That was John Cooper. That was
Okay.
John
You have
Cooper.
to
I was like, you have to legislate to have common sense.
There you go.
You know, legislate, don't be an idiot. You know, now this is a little different. This is a little different. But you know, I shake my head at that stuff. Now this, should it be on the printout?
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Condoleezza Rice just got, she was invited.
I saw it. And then she
disinvited.
declined, yeah. Well, she wasn't disinvited, she declined.
There was protest.
She called and said no.
Yeah, but college campuses today, the irony is that liberals who are supposed to be liberal-minded and open to all sides, they are the most repressive, intolerant folks in the world in shutting down opposite thought. So
Well, you could bring that up and we'll talk about it there if you want to. I'll give you my answer.
Sounds good.
I don't think there's anything we agree on, so all of it's
That's
safe.
a good thing. That's a good thing. Otherwise
All of it's
very
safe.
boring. Like some of these guys have shows, and they have guys who just agree with them all the time. It's very boring. You know, the fun is when you're
Well, that's what your show is, unless you have a liberal to beat up.
But I always try to get the liberal, and they won't come.
They won't come?
No, I get a lot. I had
Who's
Zimmerman,
come? Oh, he has
Pat
come?
Halpin, I've had Zimmerman, Chris Hahn, who was again.
Okay,
Michelle.
how's he doing?
He's good. I think he, you know, he does a Sunday show here. He's got like a one liberal show. A couple of others have been on. Oh, Dave Spriggs and Lisa Tyson.
You know, I'm like really out of touch now, you know. I'm very out of touch now, you know. You can tell.
No, but I haven't seen you around. That's what. But you're still smart enough
To make it up?
Make it up. That's why we love you. You gotta have someone who can just make. I got one guy. I have one guy who's conservative background. Now he's involved. He knows everything. But he froze. He was leaving.
Am I doing all right?
You're doing great. And you just gotta have, you're a lawyer. You gotta have the balls and just say what you want to say. But here's a guy who probably knows a lot more about local stuff than you because it's his life.
Right. Wow.
Hey, it's
Wow.
there you go.
I'd be
You and your
mortified.
husband in a couple of years going down to Carolina. All right, let's hang up this law practice and.
It's going to be earlier than you think.
It's been 40 years.
I'm doing it before I'm in a wheelchair.
Let me tell you.
I'm doing it
loving
before I'm in a wheelchair.
I am so slowed down now. I'm doing this.
Well, that's what I'm starting to do.
I can take this, so I do this. I'm doing the up-council work. The up-council work. I've got a for-profit that consults, and that's all I want to do. And I got my not-for-profit course, and of course, 30 seconds. And
30.
I'm not looking to get rich. I'm fine.
Slowing down.
That's it. Enjoy life. Too many people dropping dead of heart attacks.
And other things.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
20.
We're going to have a call in from somebody, Tom Silman.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Hey, folks. Welcome back to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. We welcome your calls on this live call-in at 631 area code 451-1039. You're listening to Long Island Talk Radio. And if you can't get it on your radio in the future, folks, you can get it at linewsradio.com. This is our final segment. Last segment we had Elaine Turley on the Democratic side and Mike Lawler, a representative from the campaign of Rob Astorino on the Republican side. He's running for governor. He was calling in, so we cut him a break after the first session. But Elaine is in studio, and she was kind enough to stay for one more segment where we can get into some discussion about local, state, and national politics. And, of course, we welcome you for these last 20 minutes, folks, to call in at 451-1039. Elaine, I want to get very local now. And I served in the county legislature. You ran for the county legislature. And I'm a defender of the legislature. They drove me nuts. I have my problems with the legislature, and I think they spend too much money. They pander too much to special interests. They do good things along the way. I think it's important to have people who can concentrate on long-term county planning as they do. But what is my beef, which is, I think it's your beef and other people as well, editorialists, just for the sake of publicity, some people will put in these arcane, crazy pieces of legislation just to get their name in the paper. And proof positive of that, in my mind, is what we saw. And it actually got out of committee. I can't believe it. It's one thing for someone to put their name on it to get a quick headline, but one legislator has a bill in to force these owners of gas stations to put electronically on your credit card receipt the difference in price between cash and credit. And I would say that's a fine thing if we didn't already have a state requirement that the numbers have to be 9 inches hitting you in the face when you're at the pump. This is how much for cash. This is how much for credit. He got zapped one day that he didn't look at it. So now he's putting in the bill, and he's saying, I'll show you. He's going to make all of these gas station owners do this. We had one legislator say that this is government run amok. Is this legislature crazy and out of control? We got another legislator actually it's the same legislator, put in a resolution to ban puppy stores now. You got another guy a couple of years ago said if there's snow on your car, common sense, as you say, would say you shovel it off, but now it's going to be against the law if you don't take it off. At what point are they saying enough?
Okay, you left out the balloons we were
Oh,
talking
the balloons!
about.
That's right. The resolution that
Now
said
you're going to
ban
make me
balloons.
say it, and then I can't do
Well,
it
that was
because
your
it's my
local
former
legislator.
opponent.
Well,
Well,
I'll
it was
say
my
it.
former opponent.
It was
so-
legislator Lynn Nowick said we're going to ban balloons from going up because the birds might eat the balloons. And
There you go. You're
Okay.
going to get a fine if you release more than 25 helium balloons. And I always wondered how you were going to enforce it because how'd you know how many helium balloons you let loose? But I don't want to get petty. She is my former opponent. She did beat me that time, so I have to say that.
see, the people like the ban on balloons. What can we say?
So, and Steve, I remember the legislative days fondly when you were in the legislature as a Democrat, my good buddy, and a little bit of a confidant there. So we go way back to those
We
days.
do indeed.
As I said to you in the break, I always thought that if I won as a seat as Suffolk County legislator, the first thing I would do is go through the Suffolk County laws and see what needed to be repealed or eliminated because, I'm a Democrat. I believe in regulation. I believe in common sense regulation. And I believe government has a role in our lives. But I do think that we've got a lot more legislation than what we need, and that sometimes, well, I'll leave it at that. More than what we need.
And in the
as
first
far
segment-
as I'm not familiar with this particular proposal to have the gas stations print out on the electronic receipts the difference between the cash and the credit card prices. I will say this. I think you said it's John Schneiderman that's proposed it. He and I function different ways. I pull up to I go past gas stations and I choose the gas station I'm going to, whether based on the difference between the cash and the credit, because I use a credit card for everything so I can keep track.
Well, it's personal
for all my
responsibility.
gas, and so I want to make sure I'm not overpaying
Well, you
or
did
paying
your
too much
homework.
for using my credit
You
card.
did your due diligence as a
So
consumer.
so I go past.
Right,
I don't
so-
really look at my receipts that much. It's kind of after the fact, isn't it?
Well, not if it's plastered right on the pump saying, here's what it is for cash, here's what it is for credit. You already see the difference. Why do we need this extra regulation making these business owners spend all of this money to make it electronic? It's just nuts. Again, we started off the show earlier with Lee Zeldin talking about in the state this way. It's not germane just to the county. They passed a bill saying that yogurt is the new law in Suffolk in the state of New York. I mean, they don't have better things to do.
Well, maybe they're helping me. Maybe I'll eat more yogurt and less chocolate cake. I could certainly use to do that. We're on radio, so you can't see. I could use to do that. But, I don't
looking
see it.
good, folks,
I
let
don't
me tell
see
you.
it as a big burden on government to print the difference on the receipt. I don't see where it makes a lot of sense because it's after the fact. You certainly can't return the gas because you didn't like the price. So I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense to me. I don't see it as a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
I will continue to drive past my gas stations either way to see what the difference in cash and credit
Makes sense.
is.
That's the whole thing about, some people are so over the top with government being the nanny state that they really just take away common sense. And
Listen, Steve, I got to tell you, let's get back to Common Core that we talked about
Okay.
earlier. You want to hear my gut feeling about that? My gut feeling, and I don't know if the standards are something that's going to improve education in the nation or not, but I feel like the opponents are opposed to it. The strongest, the most vocal opponents are opposed to it because it's the federal government's idea. And they see it as a states' right issue. It's ideological grounds, and it has nothing to do with whether or not it's better for our children.
Well, you're right as
And
far
I
as-
think we should stop. We should stop and look at, is it going to be better for our children? Not, are we ideologically opposed to it? Because we throw it out on the wrong basis, and we hurt our kids.
Okay, well, before we get into that, and I want to respond to that, we have a caller on the phone coming in and on line one, and welcome to the show.
It's good to be with you, Steve.
Hi, what's your name? It didn't flash up.
Oh, it's Tom Silmy.
Oh, Tom! I didn't know it was you. Tom Silmy, the legislator, the county legislator. Great, you must have heard us talking about the gas station bill, I guess, right?
I have to tell you, I was out Mother's Day shopping with my daughter. I just walked into my car and rang the phone up. Is that Michelle Schimmel that's with you today?
No, I'll tell you, it does sound like Michelle a little bit. It's Elaine Turley, a Democrat from Smithtown. We're going back and forth a little bit on different issues. And I started off this session about how government can be in this nanny state mode and they get out of control. I mentioned this bill where, they want to require that station owners spend all this money to electronically put on your credit card receipt the difference when I think you said in the paper, it's already a law that it's a 9-inch warning to begin with. What was your term? You said something that was pretty astute.
Well, it's government gone wild.
That was it.
I think this is the most ludicrous bill I've ever had the privilege to vote on, quite frankly. If we expect somebody to drive and they're looking at street signs, they're hopefully looking at their speedometer, and they have to pump some gas. And when you pull up to the gas pump, there are some instructions that you have to follow. If we can't expect them to actually look at the 9-inch numbers atop the pump that tell them how much they're going to be paying for gasoline, I'm not sure what we can expect them to do.
Well, I don't know why we'd be surprised about this, Tom and Elaine. Tom Sulmy and Elaine, Tom Sulmy, a legislator, Elaine Turley in studio here. And this is Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 451-1039. This is what you get in the new nanny state. When President Obama was running just in 2012, they published a big pamphlet that everyone could see, The Life of Julia. And what was that all about? It was showing this young woman, Julia, how she can get cradle to grave benefits from the state, from, the first thing that you're born all the way to food stamps and disability and one thing after another, all the different programs encouraging people to get more and more of this, work less, get more from the nanny state. It doesn't surprise me that you have all these bills that are so over the top.
I don't see the connection.
You have to wonder what comes next.
I don't see the connection. I think you guys are so exaggerating this bill and the impact of this bill.
It's a mindset, Elaine. It's a mindset that people are so irresponsible, so little personal responsibility that they need the government to do everything, to the extent where now you need the government to force a business owner to put an electronic warning on your credit card receipt when something is hitting you in the face with 9-inch letters. I don't know. Am I wrong, Tom?
No, I think you're exactly right, and I think it does beg the question: what comes next? And businesses are forced are facing regulation after regulation after regulation. If it's not one little thing, it's another little thing, and before you know it, all these little things add up to windows that are boarded up, and people that are leaving our state and our county for greener pastures where government, gets out of the way of business and lets them do their thing, and we can create jobs and we can grow the economy. Well, you just can't do it when businesses are faced with such, and it's not, this particular regulation is just so beyond the realm of necessary when you have those 9-inch numbers atop the pump that you have to just shake your head.
Well, listen, Tom, I appreciate you taking the time to call in. I'm right on with you on your perspective here. You've been a great supporter of the business community, the taxpayer. Thanks for joining us for your 2 cents here. I'm with you. Hopefully you can stop this thing in the legislature, but I do note it got out of committee. But
it did get out of committee. Listen, be well, Steve. Elaine, it's good to chat with you, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
There now.
You got any last parting shots on this one, Elaine, before we go on to another issue?
I just think it is such an exaggerated effect that we're talking about. I think it's just such a minor piece of legislation and being blown up into something, just much bigger than what it is.
Let's
By the way, I'm a self-employed business owner, as is my husband, and I don't think we have an awful lot to complain about. And let's talk about New York State, because you talked about New York State earlier, and you talked with Mike Lawler, and you talked about Cuomo, and we talked about, the economic situation in New York State. and it not being very favorable towards businesses. Let's talk about the filming industry. Have you noticed how many films and TV shows, movies and TV shows are filmed in New York now?
Yeah, you want to know why?
Yeah, because we've given tax
Right,
incentives.
right.
And you know what? We're
30%
killing Los Angeles.
That's a great
We're killing Los
Doesn't
Angeles.
that prove you are proving our point that
I'm
when
not I'm
you
proving
cut
the point
taxes,
that here in New
you
York
bring
State,
in more revenue.
we're trying to stimulate certain areas of the economy.
And how do you do it? You cut taxes. You don't raise them.
Andrew Cuomo, you're doing it.
Yeah,
you're
but that
bringing
was-
the filming industry here from
That
Los Angeles.
started long before Governor Cuomo, but he has been in favor of it. Listen,
and I believe we're doing the same thing with technology. And I know you're really against this startup New York, and I don't know a lot of it.
Actually, I'm not. Actually, when I ran for governor, one of the things that I proposed to kickstart upstate New York, which was in the doldrums, still is, I said have at least a 1-year waiver on capital gains for any investments in upstate companies. Now, they didn't adopt that exactly, but they did something similar. They said, we're going to give like a 10-year tax cut, but those who come around the certain educational hotbeds. I think it's a good idea. Right. What I'm questioning is the $140 million that is going toward the advertising on this, to the point where they're touting it as being a new New York. We're not there yet. We're not at a new New York. I mean, there's been some tinkering around the edges, but as Mike Lawler said, taxes did not go down in New York. There's been a $2 billion increase in overall taxes. The corporate tax, and I got to give the governor some credit, at least he did try to cut the corporate tax by a little bit. You still got such a long way to go. But when you got an income tax that's close to 9% for successful people, and you got no income tax down in Texas and nothing in Florida. I'm not saying we should do away totally with our income tax, but you gotta lower taxes brings in more revenue. And you said it yourself, Elaine, when you look at the film industry. We forced them out of New York with crazy union rules and taxes that were too high. As soon as we lowered the taxes by 30%, I take pride in that because I proposed that resolution, both when I was in Albany and as a county executive, and they did it. And we're booming now with all this film. So you agree? Lower taxes mean more revenue?
I think that for economic development, we should choose certain industries and do that. I also think we talk about low taxes and we talk about other states. We talk about low property taxes. I told you that in North Carolina, I know there's a much lower property tax. Mm-hmm. You know, my mother lived in North Carolina for a number of years, and her husband's still there. She died a couple of years ago. And their property tax is very low, and she reminded me of that constantly. You know, they drop their garbage off at the garbage dump once a week.
I think people would say I'd gladly do it if you'd lower my taxes to $2,000. I would do it in a second.
Have you had children in the school district when they've eliminated late buses? I had 2 children go through the school district, Steve.
I'm in Bayport, Blue Point. We don't have buses.
Well, you know what? Whenever they changed anything in this school district, everybody says, "I want my school taxes
you are right.
to go
People
down."
want their cake and eat it too.
Eliminate
There's
the
no
bus.
doubt. But people want their cake and eat it too. They want more services and lower taxes.
That's right.
But there is a limit here. You know, when I think people will say, and you look at polls, would you be willing to take less services if it meant less taxes? They're saying yes to that.
No, here's the question,
taxes
Steve.
are getting
Here's the
so
question.
crazy.
Here's the question you got to ask. I walked to 5,000 doors when I walked door to door running for office, and I asked people this question. Don't tell me what you want your neighbor to give up to lower your taxes. You tell me what you will give up. And that's the question you got to ask.
Well,
because
you're right.
Everybody's going to tell you what services should be eliminated, what programs should be eliminated to reduce taxes, but it's never going to be a program that benefits them.
You're right, and that's why when you ask people, and you mentioned consolidation before, yeah, everybody talks a good game that they want consolidation until it's their own district, and then they don't want it consolidated. But you know, that's why, you know, personnel is 70% of a budget, which brings us back to the mandates. If you want to know why taxes are so high, you have to first understand what's the driving of the cost. It's personnel. It's cops making $200,000. It's the Triborough Amendment that you're against reforming. It's the mandatory arbitration thing that you're against reforming. You got to reform these things.
By the way, listen to me. I don't think that the Triborough Amendment, you got to start and you got to look at it and really look at it honestly. Does the Triborough Amendment really stop the teachers' unions from negotiating? I don't think so, because it's not. You're still not getting the contract increase.
Here's why
and by the way, you want to give teachers the right to strike now? You want to say it's
don't
okay
have the right to strike anywhere else, and they don't have a Triborough Amendment anywhere else.
I don't care what you're doing.
And they don't have the salaries that we do here. That's exactly right. What is different about New York from these other places that make us so more expensive? We have a Wicks law. They don't. We have a scaffolding law. They don't. We have Triborough Amendment. They don't. We have mandatory arbitration. They don't. They can't strike either. Federal workers can't strike.
Maybe they should aspire to us instead of us aspiring to lower the bar. So with that, you said you once talked about Nigeria.
They don't want to aspire to us and have $15,000 taxes.
I don't know about that.
All right, you're mentioning Nigeria. We got 3 minutes left. I wish we had 30 minutes on this one, but you know what my pet peeve is. My pet peeve is this manufactured war on women here in the U.S. from Democrats, because it's a campaign issue. The wage gap, which is make-believe when you look at apples to apples. The real war on women, Elaine, is kidnapping young girls because these crazy Islamic extremists don't want them to have an education. It's murdering women because they've had an extramarital affair. It's genital mutilation in these different countries. That's a war on women. Finally, they're paying attention to that because they're stopping their nonsense with the distraction.
All right, stop, because now it's my turn.
Go ahead.
No. You know what? It's horrendous. That's not something. Thank God we live in the United States of America and Nigeria. That has nothing. That's a horrible situation. But that's not what we compare ourselves to. And what we got to be wondering now as a country, and what I have to be wondering, is why anybody would want to prevent me or any other woman in this country from accessing the health care we need in the terms of contraceptives. Why would we say that we should not mandate insurance companies to cover contraceptives? Are those companies that are going to say, no, we're not going to offer contraceptive coverage, say, we'll give you free child care if you have a child, though, so you can continue working after you become pregnant and have that child? Listen,
I'm
let's go back.
pro-choice and
You
I'm
were
for
talking
it.
about Rick Perry earlier.
Right.
Talk about Rick Perry. Talk about eliminating clinics, making it impossible to have abortion clinics and for women to get abortions in Texas.
I'm pro-choice, but don't tell me
Steve,
that in other states you can't get abortions. It's just not true. I disagree.
Look at what's going on.
Elaine,
you
let me
as a
respond
woman,
now.
we want to mandate you having an internal sonogram, putting something inside your body before we're going to let you have an abortion.
I'm a pro-choice person, but I remember when I was going.
As an American
let me say now,
I am
when I
devastated
was
by
going
that.
for the endorsements of NARAL and these pro-choice groups, I was with them 90%. Then they wanted me to be for partial birth abortion, and I said, don't you guys have any limits? And you know what? If you're not with them 100%, you're against them. They're crazy, just like the NRA
That's
on
not
the
where
other
we
side.
are now.
They're crazy.
That's not where we are now. We're in an extreme situation now where we are actually denying
That is
women.
not happening anywhere.
It
and
is
I would
happening.
be with you, standing with you
It
if
is
it was,
happening.
and it's not.
It is happening, and it's happening with the consolidation of the hospitals. Look at the situation in Arizona where the nun was excommunicated, Margaret McBride, because she approved an abortion to save
Oh man,
a
I
woman's
gotta have
life.
you back on the show.
Save
I'm
a woman's
I'm
life.
having you back, Elaine Turley, because we didn't get into the whole Nigerian thing and this wage differential, which I say is make believe, you don't. You're coming back here whether you like it. I'm dragging you in here. We're gonna have another conversation.
We're
okay?
dancing to the closing music right now.
Thank you for being with us, Elaine. You're a gem. We always say the debate is spirited, never personal. You're a good friend. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next week on Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. Bye-bye.
registered the lowest in recent history for this current academic year, according to state figures. Funding across Suffolk and Nassau counties would rise 2.27%, the second smallest average increase since 1996. A recent News 12 Hofstra University poll shows Long Island residents will be willing to use fewer chemicals on their lawns in order to protect the quality of our drinking water. The results of the poll showed 76.2% of those asked said yes, they would be willing to change the way they took care of their grass. Members of the organization Save the Great South Bay are suggesting Long Islanders who want to make a difference use more organic products on their lawns and gardens. Huntington Village will be trying out free valet parking starting in June for 3 months on Fridays and Saturdays. The town says it found valet parking could increase lot space by 40%. The members of the Business Improvement District are hoping this will stop people from thinking twice about coming to the village just because it's a pain to find parking. Listen to Long Island's own Brian Kilmeade right here from 9 to 12 every weekday morning. I'm George Romano for 1039 LI News Radio.
Here's the latest. From ABC News, I'm Richard Davies. It was a solemn ceremony. The remains of many hundreds of unidentified victims of the 9/11 attack in New York returned to the World Trade Center site. The remains sealed in plastic bags are moved from the lab to an underground repository. ABC's Aaron Satorsky says it's in the same building as the 9/11 Museum, which will open later this month.
The repository is 70 feet underground and accessible only to families of the dead and forensic scientists who are still trying to use ever-advancing DNA technology on the 41% of 9/11 victims never positively identified.
A small number of families protested against those plans. A second body has been found after a hot air balloon fire in Virginia. A third person is still missing. The search continues. The blaze has some concern about balloon safety. ABC's Lindsay Janis says there have been half a dozen serious balloon accidents in the past 5 years.
Hot air balloon rides are thrilling and beautiful, but not without risk. Last year, a San Diego couple lifted off for their wedding, only to come crashing down through a fence and into a nearby neighborhood. One of the most tragic hot air balloon crashes in recent history was in January 2012. A Phoenix flight in Caterton, New Zealand, collided with a high-voltage power line while attempting to land. The fire caused the balloon to disintegrate, killing all 11 people on board.
Last year in Egypt, the balloon crash killed 19 people on board. A clerk in Carroll County, Arkansas, issued the state's first gay marriage license today. The license breaking a barrier against same-sex weddings in the state that followed a judge's ruling. A day of commencements at many colleges and universities. Michelle Obama spoke at Dillard University in New Orleans today, telling the class of 2014 higher education should continue beyond graduation. This is ABC News.
LI News Radio traffic.
An accident being worked on East Patchogue, Medford Avenue over by Morris Avenue, so that's an intersection to avoid. Nichols Road typically stop and go southbound side. Oxhead Road on down toward Wisconsin. Wisconsin Highway with the new road layout both ways between Hawthorne Road and Mount Pleasant Road. Sunrise Highway has that long-term work as well, both ways between North Road and Stephen Hans Path. We are in pretty good order on the LIE Route 110 all the way on out toward Riverhead, not doing too badly on the northern or the southern state parkways, and we're looking good on the north and south forks. This report brought to you by SpeedCounts.com. Is your computer slow? Get a free computer diagnosis and activate SpeedCounts.com software to remove computer viruses, junk files, and clutter that slow down your computer. Visit SpeedCounts.com. That's SpeedCounts.com. I'm Andrew Torres on 1039 LI News Radio.
LI News Radio weather.
Fog lifting, still mostly cloudy, more of a southwest breeze, and still a 30% chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms, 76. Showers and thunderstorms likely this evening. More patchy fog late. Meteorologist John Weatherby on 1039 LI News Radio.
Hi, I'm Allie.
And I'm Kevin. And we are Mr. and Mrs. Motivation. Join us every Thursday evening at 9 p.m. and allow us to motivate and inspire your life.
That's every Thursday at 9 p.m. beginning May 8th on 1039 LI News Radio.
Yes, hello, and good afternoon. Welcome to Senior Counsel. I'm Stephen Stern, partner in the law firm of David Dow, Siegel & Stern, Long Island's elder law, estate planning and special needs firm. And I'm pleased to be with you today and to welcome our guest, Oded Binami. Oded is counsel at David Dow, Siegel & Stern with a concentration in real estate law. And Oded, it's great to have you with us today. Welcome. you, Steve. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And for those who, because they're driving, they're listening, they're tuning in on the internet all over Long Island, all over our region, maybe for starters, we could talk about your name, Oded Benami.
I always want to get that out of the way before anything else. So Oded Benami, you might wonder what kind of name is that? Sounds normal, and if you could see me out there in Radio Land, you'd...
It wasn't the airplanes. It was beauty killed the beast.
Faster than a speeding bullet.
Hey, where are all my comic books?
Holy complications. Holy agility. Holy blackout. Holy missing relatives. Holy complications. Holy agility. Holy blackout. Holy missing relatives.